Hello, my fantastic friends, and welcome to a lesson that should get you flying off into fun, excitement, different ways of experimenting and tracking, and, well, what am I talking about? I'm talking about kites. You ever seen one or flown one? You ever wondered where they came from or when they came from? Because actually, we're not really sure. It's another one of those things that sort of showed up around the world at different times and in some places at the same time. Although the ancient Chinese claim that in the 5th century BC, two Chinese philosophers, Moji and Lu Ban, created some of the first kites for flying. We definitely know that around 549 AD, kites were definitely being flown in China. There is a record in history of a rescue mission where they used a kite with a message on it to create a successful rescue. How cool is that? And after that, it spread throughout Asia and became used for all sorts of things, like measuring the distance to a place, testing the breeze or the wind speed, lifting people, creating signals and communication. There were even military uses as well. And when it spread into India, a new sport emerged. Kite fighting. Can you imagine that? Two kites flying around neck and neck? Or is it string and string? Well, anyway, they eventually made their way to Europe, where they became used for science. And also, you might even know that story of one of our founding fathers flying one with a metal key attached, trying to attract some lightning. How dangerous! More on that later, because today we're going to build our own kites. Now, the Chinese had a lot of great things to use for kites because they have to be light, they have to be a bit wind resistant, and they had silk and paper and all sorts of things like that. They also ended up decorating them to look like all sorts of amazing and majestic things. Today we're using some much simpler materials, and this is what you're going to need. You will need a plastic bag, just like a grocery bag. This one's from Fred Meyer. Should work pretty well. You will also need some drinking straws or even coffee stir sticks. Skewer sticks might work as well, but these are very lightweight, and I honestly can't think of something much more lightweight and sturdy than straws. Make sure to have some string or yarn. You'll need tape. You'll need a straight edge or ruler. You will need scissors and a marker. A Sharpie works really well. We're going to be drawing on this bag. A pencil or a regular pen just won't work today. And to start off, all we will need is our scissors, tape, and straw. So let's clear the rest out of here and get ready. All right, so go ahead and take your 3 straws and cut one of them in half. This piece we could save for our next kite, so put that aside. And what you need to do is take one of your straws and you're going to make it longer by taping this piece to that piece. There's a pretty easy way to do that. Get your piece of tape ready. Get your 2 straws together. Go ahead and just put that piece of tape down on those while you have them together, and then just roll it around. Should create a nice bond between those 2 straws, and now they're best friends, and you've got a much longer straw here. How cool. The next thing we're going to do is create a cross or a T. Now, if you have one of those bendy straws, that's a pretty good place to put it, is somewhere just below that. You don't want an X, you don't want a plus, you really want more of a T shape. And once you're happy with where it is and you think it's nice and centered, go ahead and tape that. You might even decide to tape the crossbar over it to make it a little bit easier. You might also decide to squash it down when you do this. All right. Now we've got a nice shape there. If you do feel like once you've got that down, one side's a little bit too long. Now, if it's really off, you're going to need to try again. But if it's just a little bit, you can easily make a quick snip and fix that. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we need our plastic bag. And here it is. Start by grabbing those handles, find out about where they start on the bag, and cut them off. Now, don't throw this plastic away. You might need it later. If you make a tail or something, well, these are already sort of like ribbons, so they might work very well. But put those aside for now. And your bag should be much more rectangular, but you need to make another cut. We're going to cut along the seam all the way around to just get one sheet of plastic. Again, that other piece you end up with, just set it aside. You never know when you might need it. What you have left, flatten it out nice, and then go ahead and grab that crossbar that you made. Go ahead and find a place to fit that. And you really need to make sure it fits and that there's room to connect each of the ends to the other end. So if I put it in a place like this, well, I'm not so sure that's going to give me the edge I need. It might, but let's not risk it. Let's get it right in there, a nice spot. Okay, go ahead and then tape all the ends down to the plastic. As you do this, do stretch out the plastic a little, but you do want it to bulge a little bit. That is important. You want it to be able to catch that wind just enough, but too much would not work so well. So see, I've got it nice and stretched out, and I'm going to go ahead and tape it. Okay, now it's attached. Fantastic. We've got to cut the kite out of this piece of plastic, and that's where you're going to need your straight edge and also your marker. We're going to take the straight edge and line it up with the tips of our crossbars, right, like that, and then trace the line from one tip to the other. And another note about doing this, if some things are just slightly off, it's okay. It might still work pretty well, and you might also learn some ways that you can experiment and change it for your next model. Let's go ahead and get the rest of this traced out, and then we'll start cutting it. Once you have that shape on there, you can go ahead and cut it. Cut patiently. Try not to cut all over the place and create little areas where it can rip and snag. You really want a nice, clean cut, so take your time. I'm definitely going to take my time, but I'll speed it up for you so you don't have to wait for me. All right, and again, you might be able to use this for something, so just put it away for now and save it maybe for later, but your kite's pretty much done. And if you even take it and move it around like this, you can probably realize that it's starting to capture some air. A couple considerations at this point. We're going to be attaching a string in a moment, but also you might need a tail. And you might want to try it without one first just to see how that works. But just in case you're interested to see what that might look like, go ahead and grab those handles that you had, those ribbons, and see there's some little pieces here. You can clean them up real quick. But you might have two of those. Just a little bit of cleanup. You should have two pretty nice looking ribbons of plastic. And you can tie these together pretty easily. And this will give it a little bit of resistance and drag to help balance it. So if you notice that yours is whipping around a lot, this might help make things a little bit better, having just a little bit of drag. And that you can just sort of roll up, get a little piece of tape, and just attach it to the base. And that should help to give it some extra support. And you can just tape that around to the back, and you got a lovely tail there. And it even has a nice little bow on it. And you can experiment with different lengths and different thicknesses and different weights, but we do need some control over this thing, or it might fly off and we'll never see it again. So do grab your string and measure out a good length. A meter is a pretty good length to start with. If you're pretty sure this one's going to fly, it may be 2 or 3 meters. And then when you really get a hang of this, more and more string. You could use a whole bundle of it. But for me, I'm just going to measure out about 2 meters for now to give it a good test outside. You can tie it around the crossbars. That's one way to do it. There's also, sometimes you may see people put a string across this way and then they'll tie the string to that. But for us, on our first time, testing this out, making sure it all works, go ahead and take your piece of string and just try to get it in the center of a piece of tape. Nice and lined up, just like that. And then you can take that, whoops, and tape it right to your kite, right to the crossbar. Oop. Good thing we're using some tape. We can peel it off and make sure it is centered. That will be a bit important, is having that string nice and centered, or your kite may veer off to one side or the other. All right. And there we go. Our kite is ready. We can take this thing outside and test it. So let's do it. I'll see you there, friends. Hey, friends. We're out with our kite. And I wanted to talk to you about something really important before we start flying this, and that would be these. And these are power lines, and that is something that a kite can come into contact with, and it can become a huge disaster, a big safety issue. So exercise a lot of caution when you're out there flying. Try to fly away from these if you can, but if you do need to fly near them, make sure that kite is pulled in enough so it's not coming into contact with those. Always be safe, friends. So let's give this a try. And you can see, even just pulling it through the air gives a little bit of drag. And as we pull a little harder, it actually does lift. So let's check out what happens when we move around with it. So friends, now that you've given this a try, have you started noticing some things? Have you started thinking about some things you might want to change and try out? What would happen if we made it wider, or taller, or larger, or lighter, or heavier? Or what if the tail is longer or shorter? Or could we make double kites, triple kites, strings of kites? There are so many avenues of exploration and experimentation available, and I hope you find a nice windy day soon, or that you can run nice and fast. Let yourself take to the skies, my friends. I'll see you again soon.